The alien's chitinous exoskeleton bore the marks of countless battles, scorch marks, jagged scars, and a faint limp that revealed itself as he stood to address the Senate. His voice, deep and gravelly, resonated through the chamber's amplification system. Honored delegates of the Empire, I come before you not as a soldier, but as a witness to a truth you refuse to see. He paused, his multifaceted eyes scanning the assembly. Skepticism was etched onto the faces of his audience. Some whispered to their aides, others simply crossed their arms in visible defiance. Rathgul continued, undeterred. You believe Earth to be an insignificant backwater, its people primitive and fractured. You are wrong. Humanity is unlike any adversary the Empire has faced. A ripple of laughter spread across the chamber, led by General Krestow, a towering figure with sharp, angular features and an air of smug superiority. Enough of this drivel, Rathgul. We've heard these tales before. Earth is a speck of dust, hardly worthy of the Empire's attention. Their weapons are crude, their tactics laughable. What could they possibly do against us? The veteran's mandibles clicked softly, a nervous tick that betrayed his unease. You misunderstand, General. It is not their weapons you should fear. It is their spirit. Humans do not fear war. They thrive in it. The room fell into a tense silence. Even Krestow's smirk faltered. Rathgul took a slow step forward, leaning on his staff. His voice dropped, compelling the Senate to lean in closer. I have seen them endure pain that would break any of us. I have watched them fight, not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival, for each other, and they do so with a ferocity that defies reason. The silence stretched until Advisor Malroth spoke, his calm, analytical tone cutting through the tension. You speak of Earth soldiers as if they are more than they appear. Provide an example, Commander. Convince us with facts, not theatrics. Rathgul's gaze turned cold. I will tell you of Captain Nathan Hayden. A holographic projection flickered to life above the chamber, displaying the grainy footage of a human battlefield. Smoke billowed across the scene, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed faintly. Rathgul gestured to the image. This is from the Battle of Kragorian Ridge. The Empire deemed it a minor skirmish, but to the humans, it was a fight for survival. The projection zoomed in on a man clad in battered armor, his face smeared with dirt and blood. His eyes burned with determination as he barked orders to his squad, rallying them despite their dire situation. Captain Nathan Hayden, Rathgul intoned. His unit was outnumbered 10-1. Their weapons were outdated, their supplies dwindling. Yet, they held the line for 3 days. General Krestow snorted. A desperate gamble, nothing more. No, Rathgul snapped, his voice rising. It was resilience. When the Empire's forces overwhelmed their defenses, Hayden led a counterattack. He fought with everything he had, a broken blade, a scavenged rifle, even his bare hands. He did not stop until reinforcements arrived. By then, over half his squad was dead, yet they had accomplished the impossible. They had held. The hologram faded, leaving the Senate in an uneasy silence. Rathgul stepped back, his voice lowering again. Humans are not bound by fear as we are. They fight even when logic dictates they should surrender. They adapt, they endure, and when cornered, they are the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The Emperor's shadowed figure stirred for the first time. Though his face remained obscured, his voice carried an icy weight. You suggest we fear this species, Commander? That the Empire's might is insufficient to crush such defiance? Rathgul's mandibles clicked again. I suggest caution, Your Excellency. Earth soldiers will not yield. And if you continue to ignore their capabilities, the cost will be immeasurable. The chamber erupted in murmurs and accusations. Some called him a coward. Others demanded his dismissal. Yet, a few sat in contemplative silence, their expressions unreadable. Malroth leaned toward the Emperor, whispering something too soft to be heard. Krestow stood, his voice booming over the din. Enough of this nonsense. The Empire will not be cowed by myths of human bravery. We will crush Earth, as we have crushed all others. Rathgul's gaze met Kreztal's, his multifaceted eyes glinting with an unreadable emotion. You cannot conquer a species that has already conquered fear, General. Mark my words. With that, the veteran turned and limped toward the chamber's exit, his warning hanging heavy in the air. The Senate's murmurs followed him, but he did not look back. Outside, the cold, sterile corridors of the Imperial Palace awaited him, but Rathgul's thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered the faces of the soldiers he had fought alongside and against on Earth. Their eyes had burned with a fire he had never seen in any other species. He prayed the Empire would never have to face it. As the chamber doors sealed behind him, a faint, chilling whisper escaped the shadows near the Emperor's seat. If they resist, we will burn their world to ash. Rathgul paused, his breath catching for a moment, before continuing into the darkness. The courage of Captain Hayden was extraordinary. Rathgul began, his voice steady, but carrying a deeper note of conviction. But he was not an anomaly. Earth soldiers are not driven by technology or numbers. They are driven by something far more difficult to defeat: willpower. Allow me to tell you of another. He gestured, and the hollow projector sprang to life again. The image of a frozen wasteland appeared, harsh winds howling against jagged cliffs as snow swirled in a chaotic dance. Figures moved through the storm, their shapes barely visible against the blinding white. Rathgul pointed to the figure at the forefront, his voice taking on a reverent tone. "Sergeant Ethan Tyler," he said, "a medic who served in one of Earth's harshest campaigns. His unit was deployed to the frozen moon of Cryer Prime, where temperatures plummeted so low that even our Empire's advanced machinery struggled to function. The humans had no such luxury. They relied on their wits, their grit, and their ability to adapt." The projection zoomed in on Tyler's face, his expression locked in a grim determination as he guided his squad through the storm. Frost clung to his beard, and his gloved hands cradled a wounded comrade, shielding the soldier from the worst of the elements. The Senate chamber was silent, captivated by the stark imagery. The Empire launched an offensive to reclaim a key supply route. Rathgul continued. Tyler's unit, cut off from reinforcements, was ordered to hold their position until evac could arrive. For 3 days, they endured relentless attacks. The cold was as much their enemy as the Empire's forces. Supplies ran low. Many fell to frostbite or exhaustion. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle over the room before continuing. But Tyler never faltered. He moved from soldier to soldier, tending to the wounded, pulling survivors from beneath collapsed trenches, all while under fire. The medics of the Empire are trained to act only when the battlefield is secure. Tyler did not have that luxury, nor did he expect it. He risked his life with every step, knowing that if he didn't, no one else would. General Kreztal's voice, sharp and condescending, cut through the silence. Heroics are nothing more than desperate gestures from a doomed species. One man cannot alter the tide of war. Desperate? Rathgul's tone was calm, but the glint in his multifaceted eyes betrayed his simmering frustration. Perhaps, but desperation fuels ingenuity. Humanity does not view war as a chessboard, General. To them, war is chaos, a storm that can only be weathered by those willing to adapt. Tyler's actions inspired his unit to endure, to fight back. By the time reinforcements arrived, they had not only held their position but inflicted significant losses on your forces. The hollow projector dimmed, leaving the chamber in semi-darkness. Rathgul's voice softened as he said, "The Empire measures strength by numbers, technology, and precision. Humans measure it by survival, by the bonds they forge in the face of annihilation." Advisor Malroth shifted in his seat, his piercing gaze fixed on Rathgul. "You paint a compelling picture, Commander. But one medic, no matter how resourceful, does not explain the pattern you claim exists. Surely, you can provide more examples." Rathgul inclined his head. "Of course, I have many." With a gesture, The hollow projector flared to life once more, this time displaying the aftermath of a brutal urban battle. Crumbling buildings lined the streets, and plumes of smoke rose into the blood-red sky. Bodies, both human and alien, lay scattered across the ruins. The image zoomed in on a young man kneeling amidst the rubble, his rifle slung across his back as he worked to free a trapped civilian. Lieutenant Tom Adler, Rathgul said, an officer who understood that victory is not only measured by defeating the enemy, but by preserving those who cannot fight. During the siege of Terra Nova City, Adler and his team infiltrated occupied zones to rescue civilians under the Empire's control. They moved silently through the ruins, using the chaos of the battlefield to their advantage. Kreztal sneered, more primitive tactics, sneaking through rubble like vermin. And yet, Rathgul countered, his tone icy. It was effective. Adler's team rescued over 200 civilians while disrupting your supply lines and communications. They did this with little more than scavenged equipment and their own ingenuity. The projection shifted to a scene of Adler standing atop a wrecked Empire supply vehicle, rallying a group of survivors. His voice, though not heard in the silent footage, was clearly commanding. Rathgul let the image linger before addressing the chamber again. This is the essence of humanity. They do not fight merely to conquer. They fight to protect, to endure. Every soldier is not just a weapon, but a symbol of their collective spirit. When one falls, another rises to take their place. It is a strength you cannot quantify, cannot predict, and that is why you should fear it. A tense silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the hollow projector shutting down. Kreztal rose from his seat, his imposing frame towering over the other delegates. You waste our time, Rathgul. Tales of isolated victories mean nothing against the might of the Empire. Earth will fall, just as every other world has. Rathgul turned to face him fully, his posture unyielding despite his wearied frame. Perhaps, he said quietly, but if you continue to underestimate them, you may find that the cost of victory is far greater than you ever anticipated. The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Malroth leaned forward, his expression unreadable, as he studied Rathgul. You truly believe they are a threat, don't you? I do, Rathgul replied. Not because of their strength or their technology, but because they do not fight for the reasons you expect. They fight for each other, for survival, for freedom, and that makes them far more dangerous than you realize. For a moment, the chamber was silent once more, the weight of Rathgul's words pressing down on the gathered delegates. Then, slowly, the murmurs began again, skepticism mingling with a hint of unease. Rathgul stood tall, his gaze sweeping the room, as he delivered his final warning. Dismiss my words if you must. But when the time comes, and you will remember what I have told you, and by then it may be too late. He stepped back into the shadows as the Senate erupted into heated debate, his scarred form vanishing like a phantom. The Empire's leaders may have dismissed his warnings, but deep within, some felt the first stirrings of doubt, a seed that would soon grow into something far greater. The Galactic fleet arrived in Earth's orbit like a storm descending from the heavens, a swarm of metallic vessels blotting out the stars. Their hulls gleamed with the Empire's sigils, a stark reminder of their dominance over countless worlds. The lead warship, Oblivion's Spear, loomed larger than the rest, its spires bristling with weapons capable of decimating entire continents. Inside the ship's command bridge, General Kreztal stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his angular face fixed in a confident smirk as he surveyed the planet below. Earth appeared unremarkable to him, a patchwork of blues, greens, and grays that lacked the majesty of the Empire's core worlds. A primitive world for a primitive species, he mused aloud, his voice carrying the weight of arrogance. Around him, officers and technicians busied themselves with preparations for the assault, their movements precise and efficient. General, a tactical officer reported, our initial scans confirm limited orbital defenses. Their satellites are outdated and poorly armed. The surface appears divided into regions of varying military strength, but none pose a significant threat to our forces. Krestal chuckled, the sound sharp and dismissive. Exactly as expected. Begin the landing operations. I want Earth's major cities under our control within the hour. The fleet's descent was a terrifying spectacle. Massive landing crafts pierced the atmosphere, their engines roaring like thunder as they broke through the clouds. They descended upon Earth's major population centers, New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, with calculated precision. Civilians scattered in panic as the shadow of the Empire fell over their cities, the ground trembling under the weight of the invading forces. On the outskirts of one such city, Captain Nathan Hayden stood on a ridge overlooking the chaos below. His face, lined with exhaustion and determination, was illuminated by the fires consuming the skyline. Beside him, Sergeant Ethan Tyler adjusted his helmet, his medic's bag slung across his back. The two men exchanged a grim look as the first wave of alien infantry began to deploy from their crafts. "They're hitting us hard and fast," Tyler said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "No time to regroup. What's the plan?" Hayden scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes taking in the unfolding battle. "We hold them here as long as we can. By time for the civilians to evacuate, they'll expect us to fall back. So we give them a fight they won't forget." Tyler nodded, tightening the strap on his bag. "Understood. Let's give them hell." The Empire's infantry advanced in perfect formation, their shimmering armor reflecting the glow of the fires around them. Their weapons, sleek and alien, fired with deadly precision, cutting through the scattered human resistance like a scythe through wheat. Yet, as they pressed forward, they found themselves met with a resilience they had not anticipated. Hayden's unit struck from the shadows, using the broken terrain of the city's outskirts to their advantage. They moved like ghosts, slipping between ruined buildings and launching ambushes that disrupted the Empire's formations. Explosions ripped through the enemy ranks as improvised explosives were triggered, and sniper fire picked off officers with uncanny accuracy. Tyler worked tirelessly in the chaos, dragging wounded soldiers to cover and administering life-saving treatment under fire. His hands moved with practiced precision, his focus unwavering even as the ground shook with the impact of artillery. "Stay with me," he murmured to a young private whose leg was mangled by shrapnel. "You're not dying today." The Empire's forces began to falter, their initial confidence shaken by the ferocity of the human resistance. General Krestal, observing the battle from his command center aboard Oblivion's spear, frowned as reports of unexpected casualties streamed in. "What is happening down there?" he barked. "General," a technician replied, his voice tinged with unease. "The humans are using unconventional tactics. They're exploiting the terrain, targeting our supply lines, and coordinating their attacks with surprising efficiency." "Unacceptable," Krestal growled. "Deploy the armored divisions. Crush them beneath our might." The arrival of the Empire's armored units marked a turning point in the battle. Massive war machines, bristling with weapons and shielded by advanced energy fields, began to push through the human defenses. Their firepower was overwhelming, reducing entire blocks to rubble in seconds. Hayden and his men were forced to retreat, falling back to a narrow canyon that offered a temporary reprieve. "We're losing ground," one of his lieutenants said, his voice laced with frustration. "We can't hold them off forever." "We don't have to," Hayden replied, his tone resolute. "We just need to slow them down." "Tyler, how many wounded can still fight?" Tyler looked up from his work, sweat dripping from his brow. "Not many, but they'll hold if you need them." "Good. We'll set up an ambush here. If they want to push through, they'll pay for every inch." As the Empire's forces entered the canyon, they were met with a wall of fire. Hidden explosives detonated, collapsing rocks onto the advancing units and cutting off their escape. Human soldiers emerged from concealed positions, firing with a ferocity born of desperation. The Empire's war machines struggled to maneuver in the narrow confines, their overwhelming firepower rendered useless in the tight quarters. The battle raged for hours, the air thick with smoke and the screams of the wounded. Hayden fought at the forefront, his rifle blazing as he led charge after charge against the invaders. Tyler moved through the chaos like a phantom, his presence a beacon of hope for the wounded and dying. By the time the sun began to rise, the canyon was littered with the wreckage of the Empire's forces. The humans had held, but at a great cost. Hayden stood amidst the ruins, his armor scorched and his face streaked with blood. Tyler approached him, his exhaustion evident but his spirit unbroken. "We did it," Tyler said, his voice hoarse. "But they'll be back, won't they?" Hayden nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. This was just the first wave. "They'll come at us harder next time." Tyler managed a grim smile. "Then we'll be ready." Far above the battlefield, General Krestow stared at the latest reports in stunned silence. Thousands of Imperial soldiers had been lost, and the human resistance showed no signs of breaking. His confidence wavered for the first time as he muttered, This shouldn't be possible." On the surface, Hayden and Tyler began rallying their surviving troops, their determination unwavering despite the odds stacked against them. The battle for Earth had only just begun, and humanity's fight for survival was far from over. The war had escalated beyond anything either side had anticipated. Earth, battered and scarred, remained defiant, its soldiers and civilians united in a relentless struggle for survival. The Galactic Empire, accustomed to swift conquests, found itself mired in a conflict that drained its resources and tested its resolve. General Krestow, once confident of an easy victory, now stood in the command chamber of Oblivion's spear, his sharp features shadowed by the flickering holographic display of Earth's surface. His eyes, usually gleaming with arrogance, now betrayed a flicker of doubt. "They're retreating to the ruins of their cities," a tactical officer reported, his voice strained. "Their forces are scattered, but they're regrouping. We've identified multiple strongholds." Krestow clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. "Then obliterate them. Use everything we have. I want Earth reduced to ash by the end of this cycle." In the heart of the ravaged Earth, Captain Nathan Hayden crouched beside Sergeant Ethan Tyler in a bombed-out cathedral. The once majestic structure was now a skeleton of crumbling stone and shattered stained glass, its silence broken only by the distant rumble of artillery. Around them, a ragged group of soldiers prepared for what they knew could be their final stand. "Reports say they're deploying orbital bombardments," Tyler said, his voice low but steady. "We can't hold this position if they start targeting civilians." Hayden's jaw tightened as he surveyed the group. Their faces were drawn with exhaustion, their eyes heavy with the weight of loss. Yet, within each soldier burned the same fire that had carried them through countless battles. Hayden's voice, though quiet, cut through the tension like a blade. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for something they'll never understand. Hope. If we fall, we take as many of them with us as we can. They need to see that Earth doesn't surrender." The soldiers nodded, their resolve solidified by his words. Tyler slapped a fresh magazine into his rifle. "Hope's a hell of a thing to die for," he muttered, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Above, the Empire's warships repositioned, their weapons primed for a final assault. The Emperor himself had ordered Earth's annihilation, deeming the planet's defiance an intolerable insult. On board Oblivion's spear, Krestow barked orders, his composure fraying as reports of human counterattacks continued to disrupt their operations. "They refuse to break," he muttered to himself, the admission bitter on his tongue. What kind of species thrives in the face of annihilation? The answer came with the force of a storm. As the first wave of orbital strikes rained down, Hayden and his soldiers launched a desperate counteroffensive. They used every resource at their disposal, repurposed enemy tech, guerrilla tactics, and sheer audacity to disrupt the Empire's ground forces. Explosions lit the night as makeshift bombs turned Imperial war machines into smoking husks. The skies roared with the sound of anti-aircraft fire, human ingenuity managing to strike down alien ships against all odds. Tyler moved like a shadow through the chaos, dragging the wounded to cover and administering life-saving aid with hands that never wavered. He fought alongside his comrades when necessary, his rifle barking in defiance of the enemy. Despite the overwhelming odds, his presence became a rallying point, his determination unshakable. Hayden led from the front, his voice a beacon for the weary and the terrified. When the Empire's soldiers pressed their advantage, he met them with brutal efficiency, his every action a statement. Earth would not fall. As they pushed forward, he glimpsed the Empire's field commander, a towering figure clad in shimmering armor, directing the assault from atop a mobile command unit. "We take him out," Hayden called to the squad, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "We cut off their head." The squad moved with precision, weaving through the carnage to flank the command unit. Hayden, Tyler, and a handful of others breached the unit's defenses, a furious close-quarters battle erupting in the confined space. The alien commander fought with calculated ferocity, but he underestimated the human's tenacity. Hayden's blade found its mark, the commander's lifeless body crumpling to the ground. Above them, Oblivion's spear prepared its final attack. Krestow stood at the helm, his resolve hardening despite the mounting losses. "Target their strongholds," he ordered. "Leave nothing standing." The first blast tore through the atmosphere, reducing entire city blocks to rubble. Civilians and soldiers alike scrambled for cover, the destruction indiscriminate and devastating. Hayden's unit, battered but alive, regrouped in the cathedral's ruins. Tyler knelt beside a wounded comrade, his voice calm as he worked to stabilize him. "We're running out of time." Hayden's gaze turned skyward, his mind racing. Then he saw it, a glimmer of opportunity. "Their flagship," he said, pointing to Oblivion's spear silhouetted against the burning sky. "If we take it out, we cripple their entire operation." Tyler's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Hayden's expression was grim but resolute. "It's our only chance." The plan was hastily formed but executed with precision. Using stolen alien equipment, Hayden and a small team infiltrated Oblivion's spear, their every step fraught with danger. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors, taking out guards and evading patrols as they made their way to the ship's core. Tyler stayed behind to hold off reinforcements, his rifle echoing through the halls as he bought them precious time. Hayden reached the ship's reactor, its pulsing energy casting an eerie glow over the chamber. He set the charges with practiced efficiency, his movements steady despite the chaos erupting around him. Tyler's voice crackled over the comms. "They're closing in. You've got maybe a minute." "Understood," Hayden replied, his voice steady. "Get out of here, Tyler. Not without you." Hayden didn't answer. He armed the detonator, his mind calm even as alarms blared around him. He thought of the soldiers he'd fought beside, the civilians he'd sworn to protect, and the planet he called home. As the Empire's forces burst into the chamber, he pressed the detonator, his final act a defiant roar that echoed across the heavens. The explosion ripped through Oblivion's spear, the massive vessel consumed in a fiery blaze. The shockwave cascaded across the battlefield, disabling the Empire's remaining ships and sending their ground forces into disarray. Tyler, battered and bloodied, watched the destruction from the surface, a mix of grief and triumph in his eyes. As dawn broke over the ruins of Earth, the Empire's forces began to retreat, their invincibility shattered. The cost had been staggering, but humanity had endured. Tyler stood among the survivors, his face streaked with dirt and tears as he surveyed the battlefield. He thought of Hayden, of the countless others who had given their lives for this moment, and he felt a surge of determination. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. "We'll rebuild, we'll fight, and we'll make sure they never forget the cost of underestimating us." Far away, in the cold halls of the Imperial Senate, whispers of the defeat began to spread. The Emperor's expression darkened as he listened to the reports, his grip on power suddenly less certain. The Empire's arrogance had led them to a costly mistake, and the story of Earth's defiance would echo across the galaxy, inspiring hope in the hearts of the oppressed and fear in the hearts of tyrants.